Did you hear me? No. It's 7 o'clock, so it's time to start the meeting. Thank you for coming along and welcome to our guests who we've met several times from Rimenham. Are there any apologies?
No apologies received.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting on page 5 of the agenda. Are you happy that I sign these minutes as a correct record of the meeting? Yep, show of hands or just nods? Yep, that's fine. Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest? We have no public question time. Are there any member questions with no member questions being submitted? Okay, oh, we should be finished by 7:30. Keep going. The public questions have to be submitted in advance to the meeting in writing. So it wasn't a question though, was it?
Questions are submitted to Democratic Services 7 days before the meeting, or 2 days if it relates to an item.
Okay, excuse me, item 23 on the agenda, page 13 to 16, and this is the gambling item that we've been speaking about for some time. Kieran, do you want to start on this one?
Thank you, Chair, members. Sorry. So the report for this paper is at page 13 of your report bundle back. It's an approach for tackling gambling related harm. The summary of the report is that the licensing authority has a policy which is an overarching statement of principles setting out how we will tackle gambling regulation, how we approach that. And then in addition to that, there is some guidance by the local government association in terms of best practice around tackling gambling related harm. So over the course of the paper, we've looked at the LGA guidance, and members of the committee directed the service to look to the LGA's guidance, look to the LGA's best practice, and see how that is impacted from a licensing perspective. So the committee for this evening is to provide an update in terms of the operation that was carried out. So we conducted an underage test purchasing operation and compliance visits, inspections of all the betting shop premises in the borough. So officers completed an underage test purchasing operation on those betting shops during December 2023. All the operators passed with a challenge to the age verification of the young person. In terms of the drill for an underage test purchase is that we'd expect a challenge on entry. So we would expect the betting shops to, as they walk through the door, to challenge and to kick out if they don't have any ID, and that matched our experience in terms of the officers and the young person. They were challenged on entry, so they all passed in those circumstances. I think the licensed officers communicated on one of the betting shops. They were said come back with ID, but you're not going to have any ID, are you? So sort of sling your hook. So they're quite firm as an approach, and I think that's probably reflective of how the betting shops are in this borough. if we take some comparisons to a London borough or a big city borough, betting shops can be quite populated. People can be watching live sport, be that horse racing or football and what have you. And the experience in our betting shops is probably quite a solitary one, with a few members of the public that are placing their bets and not exactly a packed premises. Should one of our young people have gained entry to, have got in, we would ask them to loiter around the betting shop for some time, and then eventually we would ask them to go on the fixed odd betting terminals that are often at the side or the back of the premises, and see if they can gamble small amounts. Eventually we would ask them to go to the counter and ask for change of a £20 note. And what we're looking for there is a variety of levels of where a failure could be in terms of a challenge. We were satisfied to report that for the betting premises that there was no challenge. We did carry on with the operation, and we test purchased an adult gaming centre in Wokingham. Unfortunately, that did result in a failure. So we have licensing officers that are currently working with the management there to help rectify the issues and discuss their training needs. It is for themselves as operators to conduct their own risk assessments and their own training provision and their own response to that. We will test purchase again within the next 6 months to see that those measures that they've identified themselves are adequate. Licensing officers also carried out compliance inspections of the betting shops, and we found that they had local risk assessments to hand, and they were aware of GamCare, and they had advice leaflets available and posters on display for sensible gaming. The operation was a fresh approach. We wasn't aware of what the benchmark would be. We didn't know what we would experience from it, but we have had a response back to show that largely they're compliant, and of the test purchases we obviously had a failure with the adult gaming centre, but not the betting premises. I'm happy to take any questions on the operation or the best practices for ourselves.
So
thank you. I actually want to firstly say thank you for bringing this report and for having done that work at the request of this committee, and I'm pleased that you've had the results that you've had with the tests that you've done. I've just got 2 questions. I know that with the shop that the premise that did fail, you're going to go back and do another test, but just more generally, are you going to continue periodically to do these underage tests and other tests throughout the borough with these betting sites, just to ensure that that high standard is maintained? And the second question, obviously you stated about the premises all being aware of GamCare, but are any of them actually certified? And are we doing anything to support them or encourage that certification? Because being aware is one thing, actually being certified and demonstrating compliance is another.
Thank you, Councillor. I suppose in reverse order there with the GamCare, I believe a number of them are large betting operators and certified with GamCare. They did demonstrate that they were aware of it with how the staff members have been trained and the posters and leaflets that are available. I'll go back and check to make sure that all of those operators are signed up with GamCare. For the initial question, in terms of where we stand in terms of the test purchasing going forward, I think the reality is we would assess it in terms of a risk process and a priority for the officers that we've got in place. So whilst we would like to continue around the test purchasing for betting operators, we have to have some level of satisfaction in terms of that this industry, they do take it upon themselves to self-regulate when it comes to age verification, and we also have inspections carried out from the Gambling Commission. So in essence, the priority for continued underage test purchasing for the betting shops, it doesn't necessarily show a strong need for that. But I think from what we've experienced by running that operation, when it comes to gaming machines and young people having access to gaming machines, we can see that perhaps that age verification is not in place. So what I would propose is that in the future we might want to tailor our operations in a different way, and perhaps look to our pubs and clubs and see if young people are able to access gaming machines in those environments, and see how successful or unsuccessful that those are. So I think we would probably take a different approach, but maintain with the overall theme of gambling related harm.
Thank you, Kieran. Can I just change tack on this for a minute? This afternoon, we had the elections for the Youth MP, and the six candidates that were standing to be elected with all the schools here spoke about what they would do if they were elected. And from every single one of them, there came a concern about drugs and vapes. And that is also a licensing issue, and I think we might want to take a similar effect on where vapes are sold. They came up with some ideas that they'd raise money and cure it themselves, but it shouldn't be up to them to cure it, to stop it. That's part of our job, and I'd like us to have a look at that on the next meeting agenda, perhaps, Kieran. It was a delight to hear them be concerned about things like that.
Just on that point about vapes, just thinking out loud here, there's a number of avenues to look at when it comes to vapes, not just the licensing of premises and the selling, but also the disposal. And I know it's something that the RE3 board have been talking about, and obviously our waste disposal team, because of the batteries and the fire caused there. So it might be something that wants to be some kind of joint report to look at it more holistically. Just a thought to put that out there.
Are there any other comments or questions? No? Can we? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
I suppose at this point it's worth highlighting some of the work that our trading standards colleagues are carrying out around vapes. They are carrying out test purchasing for underage vapes. One of the powers that they have in addition to that is around labelling infringements. So there is a regulation where if the vapes are a larger quantity that they can be seized by our trading standards officers. So it's a labelling infringement. But our trading standards colleagues, they have been test purchasing around the underage test purchasing, and where they do that, they've also been seizing some of this of the stock. So there is work that's currently happening in that regard. So if you're wanting to have some information on that, I can certainly collate it and bring it before the committee as an information item.
I think that would be very useful.
Just a quick question, if I may. In the licensing team, how many people, manpower we have to run the whole operation? And secondly, when it comes to criteria, how do you decide where to investigate and monitor, and what criteria is used for that? Is it intelligence-led, or is it something regular, something, I mean, Sarah said, is, probably alluded to the question which related to this as well. Is it intelligence-led, or is something regularly done? Or is there some other criteria, where, which makes the officers decide that this is the area we should actually to go and monitor?
So that does sit largely with myself in terms of the resource management of those officers. We currently have one licensing officer in post. We would have 2 officers in on the establishment. We currently have one in post, and then we have several licensing processing officers that support the processing of applications. In terms of taking priorities and strategy, we take direction from yourselves as a committee. So where you've asked us to produce work around gambling related harm, or work around perhaps the vape test purchasing, we'll take that as members, because that's your role to provide that challenge and direction and strategy. The principle that we adopt is that we try to expand, because obviously we've got so many officers in place, so we try to expand our remit, and we do that by working across boroughs. So we have a networking group between licensing managers, where it comes to the larger festivals that we might have. So for example, the Henley Regatta or the Henley Festival or Rewind Festival, we will try and source other licensing officers from other boroughs and try and get a bigger pool together, and we would lend that hand as well for their bigger events, be that Reading Festival or Ascot, what have you. So that's a new approach that we've taken, and we do get some wins in those areas, because we can increase our resources without any actual cost other than just a relationship building. We also make intelligent use of the ASB officers. So our ASB officers, they're uniformed officers, and we use them quite regularly. So if something has happened which comes in because it's a complaint, it's a reactive service, we'll get complaints that are sent in, whether they're unlicensed or whether there's noise complaints or a variety of different issues. We can task the out of hours colleagues who are uniformed and to report back. So we have to work quite smartly, but being able to work in both those ways, using our ASB officers and borrowing from other local authorities, there's some of the get around measures that we put in place. Generally, depending on the complaints that come in, there'll be a variety of different complaints for our licensed trade in terms of taxi drivers and so on. But sometimes we'll get notified of convictions, so be that applying for a higher prosecution, or be that a domestic incident that's resulted in a caution or an assault conviction, or different issues that might require a more stronger approach. And if we receive them, effectively it's dropping the day's work. It's dropping the day's work to action that through and get a decision in place. So what we try to do is look at a tasking group. So we have a public safety tasking group. We attend that as a licensing authority, and we attend that with the police, and then we also attend that with the ASB officers and housing officers, and we look to see what the issues are within the crime within the borough. So if there is some crime that's relevant to the nighttime economy, we will then concentrate on perhaps a licensed premises, so a public premises. If there's been a perception of there being too many fights or disorder, then our licensing officers will be involved in conversations with that. So we get complaints from a variety of different channels, and it's managed accordingly from that type of input. So our main inputs are either complaints into the service, complaints of other local authorities where they've handled prosecutions, information passed over from the police or through the public safety tasking group, and then also we have yourselves from elected members setting us specific work that you would like us to complete on.
Yeah, regarding the trading standards, our trading standards team that work from Wokingham is just a small team, but we are still part of the partnership when it comes to some of the issues that trading standards would deal with. So where we were talking, say, about drugs, would that come under the partnership, or would it be our own trading standards officers who would deal with it?
Trading standards as the contract, the officers are employed by the Public Protection Partnership, but they work for Wokingham Borough Council. So we are able to task the Public Protection Partnership. We meet with them and we get reports back and forth. So one of the reasons I know about the vape test purchasing is because in the meetings where I'm present, I'm hearing about the work that they have they're doing at the moment. So they're employed by the Public Protection Partnership, but we are able to task them for whatever jobs we might need to do.
Evening, Chair. Sorry for the delays. Going back to the trading standards, do we still use officers from Reading Borough Council?
We from the Public Protection Partnership, we use them, yeah. Thank you, Chair. We've brought there's a long history with this policy. We've brought it to members several times. We're in a good place with actioning this policy, but there are some areas that we would like you to consider as members this evening. So for this evening, you're requested to consider the following amendments regarding the licensing requirements for vehicles, and that's on page 7 of this bundle, at paragraph 22. We have vehicles up to 5 years old from the first date of registration will be subject to an inspection before grant or renewal, and at 12 months after from the date of grant or renewal. Where the vehicles 5 years or older from the date of registration will be subject to an inspection before the grant or renewal, and then at 6 monthly intervals for the duration of their licence. And we are looking, interestingly, now at the Euro emission standards. Clearly, it's a sensitive area of balance. From the previous committee, I'm working with our legal colleagues. We're looking to amend the policy so that the private hire vehicles all vehicles will be Euro 5 or Euro 6 emission standards if they've been submitted for grant or renewal of the licence. Now, for where we've got to is effectively a term of grandfather rights. So where those Hackney carriage vehicles were first licensed with the borough before the 19th of March 2019, no Hackney carriage vehicle licence will be issued for a vehicle that exceeds 15 years old from the date of that first registration, providing the vehicle complies with all of these sections of the policy. The wording here matches our current policy. So effectively, it's the same standard and almost a grandfather right. So if they've got an entitlement for 15 years, and we're going to maintain the entitlement for 15 years, it only impacts several vehicles, and naturally they will drop off over the space of the next year or 18 months. So they will be entitled to continue on with those vehicles. So it's only several vehicles there. They'll be entitled to continue with them on, but then for any other vehicle, they'll be subject to the Euro 5 and Euro 6 as what the overarching intention of this policy is. We've also got the dynamic around the vehicles that are involved with school transport. And the position which we are proposing, which officers are proposing, is that this requirement concerning Euro emission standards can be waived in respect of any vehicle where it's been specifically modified as a wheelchair accessible vehicle to provide local education authority contracts. And then of those school adapted vehicles, the non-adapted vehicles that exclusively undertake local education authority community transport, they're now restricted to an age limit of 15 years from the date of first registration, providing the vehicle complies with all of the sections of the policy. You can quite clearly see that the 15 years has been brought in as a matching dynamic for what we currently have for the Hackney carriage. So it appeared to be sensible. the steering that we got from members was quite strong and quite clear that we need to take a position in terms of the age, which is a balance. It was recognised that the Euro 5 and Euro 6 emission standards would be quite severe and would have affected a number of local authority contracts. Having said that, there needed to be some sort of line, and where we've got to is taking a steer from the 15 years on a Hackney carriage. Now, if members are minded to go ahead with this proposal, which is an officer's proposal, then the impact would be on 8 school transport vehicles. So this, it would impact 8 existing vehicles. If we looked at the number of school transport vehicles that we have on record at the moment, the oldest is at 19 years. There is an option that you could put an age limit endorsed of 20 years, and that would then not impact on any of those 8 vehicles, but they would steadily drop off over the course of time. But the 20 years doesn't not necessarily match the same standard as the Hackney carriage. I think the reality is that the committee would need to make a decision on. We quite clearly need an age limit, but it's where you would like to set that. The proposal from the officers is to set it at 15 years. It would impact on 8 vehicles. Alternatively, you could set an age limit of 20 years for the school transports. It wouldn't impact on any vehicles at present, but clearly from the next year it will start to tail off. And then members are also requested to note an amendment to the convictions policy for around applying for hire and driving without insurance to 7 years, and that's a measure that meets the DfT guidance around and also the mobile phones to 5 years, which meets the DfT measures, but that meets the statutory measures and is just bringing our policy in the same tone. Thank you, members.
Bill?
What about vehicles used for school transport that are old but new to us? So it's an old vehicle, but the company that's operating it wants to bring in an old vehicle. Would we restrict the age of new vehicles being registered for school transport?
I don't think we would, and I think it's for the same reasons why we're not potentially restricting the age limit so severely, and it's relevant to the work that they're carrying out for the local authority with community transport. So we would condition it as new vehicles or existing vehicles.
Like, how many vehicles are you talking about in total?
For the school transport, I think the total is 40. I think.
And what's their age distribution? So if they're all on the cusp of, say, 15 years old, and then they will they all jump over that 15 years old, or what is their distribution?
So for 15 years old, sir, there would be 8. So there would be 8 vehicles.
Yeah, what I mean is, are there some that are going to be 14 years old, so they know that if we're building a policy that means that in 2 years' time all the cars are going to be out of scope, then we're in trouble. So that's why I'm asking for the distribution.
Understood. Let me answer that now for you. Right. Okay. I would say the majority of these vehicles are between 15 and 10 years old. The high majority is between 10 and 15 years old. So that's certainly an area. Yeah.
Okay, and for the specialist ones that are being altered, I know they're not in scope, just wondered how many of those are in that number.
I don't have that information to hand specifically. There would be a low amount. So I know sprinter vans are used. 1, 2, 3. We've got 3 on there, but as you would expect, it would be a low amount. That's where they have they've modified a vehicle, so they've made lots of alterations to it to make it compliant to have a wheelchair accessibility, and they have to go through different authorizations to be able to do that. They have to have lower lift requirements and so on. So there's some considerable expense that they would go through to be able to be able to license them for wheelchair accessibility.
Rachel.
Sorry, I do.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'll let it go forward and then I'll come up with some others. I'll put my hand up later.
Thank you. Just to check, is that 15 years wording in the policy that we received yesterday, or is this an addition to it?
The 15 years for the Hackney carriage vehicles that exists right now in our current policy, and it was seen as a sensible area to carry over for Hackney carriage vehicles. What has been stolen is where the committee would want to apply an age limit, would be minded to apply an age limit for the schools. So I think we're satisfied with all vehicles being Euro 5 and Euro 6 if they come on as new, or if they're renewing for a licence, be that private hire or Hackney carriage. For several Hackney carriage vehicles that effectively we've got grandfather rights, we're going to carry that over and allow them to keep the vehicles, but they would fall off naturally over the space of a year to 18 months. And that complies with the current policy standards, so they'll be aware of that already. The main area of focus here is around the schools, because at the moment there is no age limit. You also have an option to not say set an age limit, but that wasn't what it was felt as though an age limit needed to be put in place. There needed to be some level of boundary and where that might be set.
Okay, but that's not in the draft that we received yesterday as yet. Is that right?
No, it's not in the draft. It's just detailed in your report, the wording. So at point 22, the amendments would be, if you're in agreement with that, would be 3.29 to 3.33. They would be amended and put into the new policy.
Okay, thank you. Could I also just ask one other question about more generally? Last time we had a representative here from the trade who was talking about Blue Lamp and the driver assessment, and that there was a very long waiting list for Blue Lamp, and that made it very difficult for drivers. I think last time we talked about getting on board other council approved providers and perhaps changing the wording slightly so that it doesn't just say Blue Lamp, it includes other providers as well. So has there been any progress on getting other providers on board, and can we perhaps tweak the wording so that it kind of future proofs it to say, Blue Lamp or other approved provider?
That absolutely came across in the last committee meeting, and the committee were quite clear of the expectations for officers there. One of the updates, which I have quite rightly skipped over, my apologies, but one of the updates is that we are currently doing some work in that area. So that relates to the driving proficiency test and the providers for the driving proficiency test, and then it also relates to safeguarding and disability training. And we are having meetings with the council's school transport manager, because they provide disability training to drivers and passengers assistants, and there was very sensible scope to see if that training can comply. It screams common sense. So we are looking at that, and hopefully over the course of the year we'll be able to bring a wider provision. It's certainly action to look at it, and we will obviously make an assessment over that.
Can we have an update?
Two questions or clarifications. One, you mentioned, Karen, 15 here for Hackney. but we took, but specifically the issue is regarding the transport used by for children. Or there is no age at the moment for them, and the recommendation is 15 years by the officers. And I says, why is 15 years? And what was the driver behind it, the 15 years? Is it because we got it for Hackney? Therefore, the reason is there is more extra expense here because of the alteration they have to make as a result of that. And my understanding is obviously the car has to be roadworthy from every situation. So I'm just trying to understand the logic, 15, or whether it's 15 or 20, but what is a driver which makes you to come to this number of 15 or 20?
The driver for 15 years is because the Hackney carriages are currently at 15 years, and it was considered sensible to bring the two in line. The impact is that should members decide to go with 15 years, then it would impact on 8 existing vehicles. There needs to be a balance between the costs, as you've pointed out. So whilst 15 years has been proposed by officers, there is still an alternative to set some sort of age principle, which would not affect any of the existing trade at present, and that would come at 20 years, which could be a way forward for the school's transport.
This is what I was thinking as well. Do we have to join Hackney carriage and this transport for children together, or can we actually look at them separately? One is for 15 years, the other one is 20, because other thing is 8 out of 40 is a considerable percentage of the number of vehicles which will be impacted. And plus there's the livelihood of the actual people who are providing the service as well. So I'm just thinking, being fair to everyone, as long as there's no health and safety issues being compromised here, it could be a balance, reasonable decision to come to say for transport for children, maybe 20 years, Hackney carriage, leave that as 15.
You are able to make that as a decision. The 15 years for Hackney carriages needs to stick and stay the same, and you have the ability to take an approach on the age limit for specifically the school transport provisions. That we were within your rights to set those limits.
I think we need to be very careful that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot. Excuse me. Do we do any work with the drivers on the expectations of the life of the vehicles and how and when they will be replaced? And ought we to do that so that we can maintain, especially that school's fleet?
Yeah.
Because without it, we're sunk.
Yeah. The new policy will, for any vehicle, so this is going to include the school transports, for any vehicle that's over 5 years old, they're going to be subject to biannual vehicle testing. So that's a new measure, that's a stronger measure. So where you have the school vehicles or even these Hackney carriages, private hires that are older than 5 years old, the council's taken the decision for them to be more routinely inspected, which is proportionate and fair and is set at that 5 year mark. And in reality, to the answer to your question, the policy brings that into play because there's going to be greater expectations on the maintenance of those vehicles, and we are demanding that of all licensees for vehicle owners. Clearly, any decision of tonight's committee when it comes to age limits, that'll be communicated back to the trade to be aware that an age limit is now set.
Peter said what I was going to say.
Okay, and then I think Pete's after. With regards to that 3.33 paragraph, which is obviously about the school transport specifically, has there been any further discussion with the school transport team about their views on this and our environmental health team in terms of emissions? Have they commented on what officers are proposing?
Not from environmental health, but our environmental health manager that's responsible around air quality provision is passionate on that subject and would provide us one piece on it. We have circulated this policy to our climate emergency officer as part of the consultation, which was requested from the committee, and it was noted in terms of that circulation as part of the consultation that the policy is taking steps towards Euro 5 and Euro 6. So we obviously have a mindful approach to be taken around school transports for the reality of the work that they're providing and the reflection of how they are currently licensed with us with no age limit. For other areas, we're able to take an approach of Euro 5 and Euro 6 emission standards in a much more sensible way. So it's acknowledged that the policy is still taking a steer around that area, but there is a balance to be had, and there's a real frank balance that you know, should it be an even stronger position where Euro 5 or Euro 6, it would just have too much of an impact. Even where we're talking between 15 years and 20 years, the committee understands that, you know, there's an impact of around 8 vehicles, and that's quite significant as well. But still, there needs to be some sort of sensible marker put in place, so at least we are taking our policy in the direction that it needs to go. And I think where we've had different experiences within the committee and where we've got to and where we've looked at the data and the number of vehicles that are impacted, I think we're certainly getting to a much more sensible position around where we're tiering those entries in, and ultimately, as this takes its time, the policy will eventually just be that Euro 5 and Euro 6.
I'll just come back. So just to clarify, I saw the bit about climate. I guess from the environmental health perspective, I was more thinking about public health more than anything. With regards to 8 school transport vehicles not being compliant with the modification being suggested here, what has been the view of the school transport team of that? Are they concerned? Are they supportive? Do they feel that we can still manage? Because, I mean, just for the rest of the committee's point of view, I think this is a really tough decision for us to make, because on the one hand, we need to have our statutory duty to make sure we can get kids to school and supporting them, and obviously supporting the taxi trade at the same time. You know, it's a public health issue when we have really poor air quality, and having a policy that doesn't help mitigate that. So I'm personally struggling with the balance and where the line is. So I just want to put that out there, and that's where my concern lies. But if we can do this and the school transport team believe that we can manage and still meet our statutory requirements on getting children to school, that makes it easier. If they don't, then we've got another dilemma to decide.
Come in there, Kieran, before you come back to us. I'd also like to make sure that we're working with the drivers to know what they face and see that they are able to plan and cope with that. So it's a 2-angle approach. So from climate change, yes, but also from maintaining that fleet, both the private hire and the school transport fleet, in a way that works for us as a borough.
To be clear, I'm not raising this from a climate change perspective. I'm raising it from a public health perspective.
Yes, yeah.
I just want to be clear. Air quality, air pollution is a public health issue, not a climate issue.
So are we in a position to make a decision on it, or do we need to come back? Bill, I saw you first.
Just this is an aside. It may be out of this committee's role, but we're talking about home to school transport. A number of schools run their own transport, and this would be the trusts or the academies. Do we have any control over what type of vehicle of ferrying our children around, if you like, either on school trips or using them for their own transport services?
No, sir. This is for the local education authority contracts. So if they may have PSV. Yeah, they'll have to have their PSV licenses and so on for different types of vehicles they've got.
I actually have an answer to the question I asked first before we move on, thank you, which was the views of the school transport team on 3.33, which is being proposed, and whether we can still meet our statutory requirements with that.
They are nervous. They're nervous to the implementation, and it would have an impact. It would have an impact on them. Still, they're respectful of the licensing committee making their own decision. For myself, in terms of what's being discussed, I think where we've looked at the data that's been requested from Councillor Dennis and the impacts that we have in terms of where we need to put in some type of boundary, it could well be sensible to set that standard to around the 20-year mark. We are at a point where we're going to test those vehicles, subject them to test every 5 years, and then with setting a standard which doesn't impact vehicles at present, it allows some level of space for that future where the vehicles that are at 15 years, between 10 to 15 years, they'll be communicated that they've got an age limit in place.
Pete, you were next.
With the suggestion of 20 years for the school transport, would there be any pushback from the existing Hackney carriage folks who are impacted with a 15-year to say, hold on, that's not fair, we'd like 20 years as well?
The vehicles that are impacted, we have, I think, 2 vehicles impacted which are on these grandfather rights. So at 3.32, we've got vehicles that are licensed before 2019. There's only a couple of vehicles that are impacted there, and the approach that's being taken is to maintain what their current licensing requirements are. So there's no change. What is also being provided by the committee is a grace to those historic requirements, which is certainly a good step forward. All of the vehicles, including any new or existing Hackney carriages, would be set to Euro 5 or Euro 6 emission standards.
Yeah, I don't think that really answers my question, sorry. Really, the question is, if I'm a taxi company and I'm looking at the policy and I'm saying I've got a fleet of cars which is supportive for the school transport, they've got an age of 20, and I've got a fleet of cars which I've got for normal general use and they've got an age of 15, I'm going to look at that and say, well, hold on, can't I use the 20 for my general use ones? So then they come back and push back on the council saying, can't we just have a generic 20? So I'm just wondering, if we go for 20, whether we're opening the door to having discussion on the 15.
You could well have this discussion on the 15. I think the perspective from this policy and this paper that's been put forward, it's been strongly influenced to move to Euro 5 and Euro 6 emission standards. There has not been a huge response from the trade around the vehicle standards because the age is given a lot of grace, and the movement to having biannual tests at 5 years or older, that was from a consultation response and has been amended. And I believe that it would be seen as a sensible option to have all of the trade tested at 5 years or older and to the Euro 5 and Euro 6 emission standard. With the school transports, where we're taking this policy, they had a separate policy on school transports, and we've brought them into the same policy, which is where they've got the same conviction standards, the same requirements around licensing, albeit without having to do the local area knowledge test. But they didn't have any type of license requirement on them. So the council's taking a measure here of inputting a standard over an area of the fleet of policy where there has not been any type of measure. So I think the balance is right and accurate to maintain the standards of how they are for the 15 years for the several vehicles that are impacted, continue with Euro 5 and Euro 6 emission standards, which are for all vehicles, and then taking some type of balanced approach for the area and fleet of vehicles around school transports, which have currently not got any age limit in place.
Shahid.
I mean, as Sarah said, it's a difficult one to actually come to a decision. I'm just thinking that could we actually go for, say, we'd have that caveat, a condition applied that as long as it doesn't actually, it meets a certain criteria of emissions and air quality, etc., the age could be increased to 20 as long as it doesn't have any, emission standards. Yeah, could it? The thing is, sorry, just finishing also make sure that could we set an emission standard to say that as long as we meet this emission standard, we can increase the age of the vehicles to 20, and bearing in mind that 8 out of 40 is 1/5 of the vehicles will be impacted. I'm sure that will have quite a dent in terms of service which is being provided by them. That could be actually, a way out of it.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just going to bring up the emission standards and see where we're set.
Just to help, the emission standards are related to age. That's the problem. So a Euro 6 is for a car that's newly registered from 1st of September 2015, Euro 5 1st of January 2011. So they're intrinsically linked, age and emission standards.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And that's why the age is what we're discussing, because it then links to those Euro standards. And then you go to Euro 4, which is from then it goes up. There'll be more coming, as they come out and improve the emissions that come out.
So just to make sure that I understood that means that after 15 years those standards will not be met then? Is that what we're implying then? After 15 years.
So I've got the table up here. So we've talked about Euro 5 and Euro 6 for the majority of the licensed trade. Euro 6 is 2015, September 2015 onwards. Euro 5 is the 1st of January 2011. If we took your line, which was a sensible question to bring in, the Euro 4, which is the next standard, is 1st of January 2006. That puts us around 18 years. So they are relevant. They are relevant to age. And if we prescribed it as Euro 4, it's a similar dynamic of setting an age limit on there. So the Euro 4 is the 1st of January 2006. So that would be a Euro 4 emission standard, which is 18 years. That impacts on two vehicles. So it may still be sensible to keep an actual age limit rather than the emission standards for the school transport to 20 years, but it's a similar concept around the Euro emission standards.
I suppose just one other question was, how do our neighbouring councils do? Are they sticking to 15, or do they have any, do they distinguish between the school transport and the Hackney? The age.
Each borough council is able to determine its own age limits. We quite often see a differentiation between private hire age limits and Hackney carriage age limits. It just depends on the authority. For example, in Reading, they'll have black cabs, and there'll only be certain types that are licensed. We don't have the same dynamic as that, but each council will set its own age limit, which is what we're doing here.
So there's no uniform standard as such across them. Chair, if that's the case, I think I'd like to propose this age to be increased to 20, if that's agreeable with everyone.
Thank you. Most of this discussion has really been about worrying about putting a financial burden on the operators of these vehicles. So a 15-year-old vehicle should have been depreciated to zero in terms of tax terms by the time it was 6 or 7 years old. So any responsible business would be in a position to replace these. These vehicles can be replaced for about £10,000 to £15,000 for a compliant vehicle in terms of emissions. I worry about 15 years. I know they've been inspected every 6 months, but a 15-year-old vehicle is nowhere near the same in terms of structural safety. Other aspects should it be involved in a severe accident. So I really would not support going to 20 years. What I would suggest, I've got a couple of suggestions, but what I'd be quite interested in, how much does a vehicle earn for its owner? I don't know whether we have that, because that's not anything to do with licensing. But I think that would be an interesting aspect to consider. We've got at the moment a proposal of 15 years with 6 monthly inspections. If we want to go to 20 years, perhaps we should encourage people to think about replacing them by saying 50 years, 15 or 16 to 20. They have to be inspected every 3 months. Well, the other way of doing it might be to roll it back, a bit like they're trying to do with stopping young people buying cigarettes. So this year it's 20 years, next year it's 19, 18, 17. So within 5 years, we've rolled it back to 15 years. But I am concerned about the safety of such old vehicles, when actually they should have no value on the business's books in tax terms. They should be in a position to replace them if they've been a responsible business. Thank you.
My question is, what's percentage of send children we send through the school transport? Because there's clearly issue about 8 vehicles, and those 8, are they business owned or is individual owned, and how often they have to renew their licenses?
It's not only send children that we put into those vehicles, it's children who live further away than the statutory limit for walking.
The other answer is that they're mainly owned by an operator. So yeah, rather than an individual.
I think I would like to know what school transport leaders think about this before we make a final decision. Those of us who do transport appeals know how hard it is for us to provide vehicles with drivers that are appropriately adapted. And for my own peace of mind, I'd like to know that we're protecting the children in a safe way, but we're also protecting them in a way that we can get them to school safely. And so I'd like us to delay the decision on this, if we can, till we've heard from the school transport department. Sarah?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, the first thing I was going to say is Mike suggested a route that I was going to discuss, which is sort of that sliding scale. So this policy goes to 2028, and I'm conscious that the policy actually says 2023 to 2028. So can we actually continue to delay this? I think we need to make a decision ultimately. So we've got could we do a sliding scale? But the other thing is we have got some vehicles that wouldn't be compliant, and there is a nervousness around that. But is that because we don't have a requirement to do anything? They are businesses as well. And is the fact that they have such old vehicles because we've not had a policy that has encouraged that turnover of vehicle use. If we put a policy in place that maybe encourages them and supports them on that process with a sliding scale to do that, so we can get to that position, surely that is the best outcome. So we're not putting too much strain on the school transport unit, but we are sending a clear message that this is the direction of travel. So those vehicles that are currently not compliant with what is being proposed have the opportunity to gradually do that. It's trying to balance everything here. It is safety, this is public health as well, and incentivising through policy. This is something that's in our control, and we could keep going around the houses about this and not make a decision, but we are decision makers, and we've got to make a decision. This can't keep going on. This is supposed to have come in last year.
A decision tonight. I've got my hearing aids on, I'm very loud. And that we make a decision tonight, but continue to work with school transport so that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot. Yeah.
So does Mike or Sarah want to make a proposal?
Can I actually just check that it's possible to do this on a sliding scale? If that's what people want, is it feasibly possible to do that in that more supportive way to get us there?
You can check.
Sorry?
How will you check? Feasible.
No, I'm asking if we could have some wording in the policy that would allow. So I'm asking
Yes.
Kieran.
Okay. So a sliding scale. Are we looking at, so we have a dynamic where we have existing licensed vehicles, and then we have a dynamic of new licensed vehicles. So we could set a standard, which means we are not enabling the vehicles that are being licensed. So we could set a standard for any new vehicle that's around school transports, for perhaps an age limit to be set there, and for perhaps we could set a standard around an age limit for any of the new vehicles that are coming on that are not adapted for wheelchair use, and they're going to be used for local education contracts, and they're new to be licensed, and we could set an age limit for that. And then we could also set a slightly longer age limit for the trade that we have that's an existing licensed, existingly licensed, and then move them forwards in terms of having to get those vehicles replaced. And I think Councillor Smith brought in an exceptionally sensible proposal around the fact that this is quite a long age limit, and we do have an option there to subject those vehicles that are significantly older around that 15-year point to perhaps three inspections per year. That comes across as a very sensible measure.
Thank you. I mean, I think I agree. I think we need to make a decision today. But just going on from a slightly different tack, under 3.28 of the appendix, you have insurance. And under an insurance policy, vehicles must be roadworthy. So that kind of takes it up on that side of things as well. But it does, before we take a vote and we're committed to it, I just thought I'd raise this first, because I think this is incredibly important when it says that original documents only. Now, bearing in mind most documents by insurance, because I know because I do it on a daily basis, are issued by email, they won't be original. They could be copies of emails, copies of documents, but they will not be original as such. They won't be on company paper, but they will be original documents, but in the modern field. So the way that's worded, it just will not happen these days. You will not get an original document as such. So I'm just wondering if that could be amended before we take the vote. I mean, it is probably on the side, but it is quite important.
Everybody happy about that?
I think suggestion by Mike is I think it's very sensible. But there's two suggestions there. One is the frequency of inspection, and then obviously the other one is sliding scale. I'm just thinking that what impact that's going to have if there was it every 3 months. Obviously, there's a cost to implement from the vehicle holder's point of view, but also people inspecting. Obviously, there's a whole frequency every 3 months is quite a frequent.
It's an encouragement.
Yeah, but I do agree that there needs to be encouragement for them. Somehow we need to bring that in, encouragement so they shouldn't continue to have the old vehicles. I thought sliding scale was probably a better suggestion, if I may, compared to in terms of, this is where you're encouraging them. So it could be 5 years. Okay, you got 5 years to sort this out, or then 4 and 3. I thought this way, hopefully, and you're giving them plenty of time to actually bring in line. So I don't know. This is just a suggestion that sliding scale probably could be more practical way of doing it.
Yeah, so just thinking about how we come to a conclusion on this, I think paragraph 3.33, what we're saying is that's fine and that's relevant to any new licenses coming through on this policy. And then there needs to be probably a 3.34, one extra bit in there that just says for those already existing on the license that can't comply with this yet, there will be a scale. And so it's just an extra little paragraph in there. So should I make a proposal, or Mike, do you want to make a proposal that we can then vote on and make a decision?
I would be in favour of a sliding scale, I think, probably, because that's going to give them a very clear idea of when they've got to have a vehicle that's not less than 15 years old. And actually, if we incorporate it now, we could keep it going. So it could actually push it down to 10 years if we wanted to over a period of the next 5 to 8 years. So my proposal would be that we add a condition that allows the vehicles to be up to 20 years old this year, but that age will reduce year on year on year. Leave it at that, or whatever the wording is to make it work.
So just on that, I'm just working, if we did year on year, would we actually get to 15 years by the end of this policy? Possibly not. So So if we basically make sure that we get to 15 by the end of the policy, so whether it might be 19 years, we might need to say, given that we're in 2024, working out the maths.
We have an existing policy, so this is a review. So so where it comes into effect in 2024, it's going to start from 5 years from there.
I was just going, I thought we'd retrospectively to agree this. I wasn't sure how it was going to work because it's got the dates on it. So
I would leave it open-ended. So if we wanted to roll it further than, or the subsequent committee wants to roll it further back than 15 years, they can keep it going.
Does that mean, Karen, sorry, just to understand, if we do a sliding scale, implement it now, 5 years time, 2029, it will be 15 years, and that will be in line with Hackney then? That's what the end results will be, right? So okay, right. That's what I mean. So
so we also have that, but then we're also setting a stronger position for any new vehicles being licensed, be that a school transport vehicle or not, that will have a Euro 5, a Euro emission standard for any new vehicles coming in, which is quite a strong measure and achieves the change that we want to set out. So so it's a combination of the two. Your sliding scale proposal, the more stricter sense in terms of Euro 5 and Euro 6 for all new vehicles coming in. And then I suppose the concept around your vehicle testing for those that are over 15 years old, if we want to up the sensible suggestion to up the frequency of tests to 3 tests a year rather than the 2.
Can we just have a pseudo show of hands around the table as to whether, before we vote, whether that is the sort of thing that we're happy to go with. No, this is a pseudo vote. No, I don't want to go backwards. Yeah, yes, yeah. Okay, I can see nods. Okay.
So shall I formally second Mike's proposal? So you've now got a proposer and a seconder, and we're incorporating the 3 tests a year on the additional paragraph we're adding in. Just okay.
Okay, can I have a show of hands for that policy as just explained? That looks unanimous.
Thank you, members. Thank you. Thank you very much, members. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, members. This item is set for the review of the Statement of Licensing Policy 2024. The council has a duty to review and publish a Statement of Licensing Policy. The recommendation of this report is that the committee considers responses to the public consultation, including a Get Me Home Safely campaign, and also considers a response from both Remenham Parish Council and Remenham Farm Residents Association, who have requested, amongst other things, a cumulative impact assessment for their area as part of a revised Statement of Licensing Policy. In terms of the report itself, the revised policy, the summary of amendments is that we look to include model conditions. So there is a policy includes a pool of model licensing conditions which provide a level of consistency when attaching conditions to a premises license or club premises certificate. And the concept was that the model conditions would assist an applicant to draft their operating schedule. It documents what measures an applicant will put in place to address the 4 licensing objectives, and they can ultimately become conditions on their license. The model conditions also assist responsible authorities when making their representations against applications, and also members of the licensing subcommittee when deciding what, if any, conditions should be added to a license where they're necessary or they're appropriate. They're not standardized conditions, and obviously a licensing committee can style bespoke conditions, but they certainly provide a good template and practice. With an addition of a pre-application service, and this is where we're looking to provide effectively a cost-efficient pre-application service. It's available at low cost, and it'd guide applicants through the licensing process. It's not expected for this to be a huge demand. The pre-application advice service is there for applicants that are perhaps small businesses, and they don't wish to use a licensing solicitors or solicitors fee, but they'd have an option to use the council's licensing service for some pre-application advice. So that's looking at template public notices, the template for a newspaper advert, and a discussion around what model conditions. So we're trying to up the standard before they come in and guide them through that process. The policy also looks to women's safety in the nighttime economy. We've got a number of responses to that. So in terms of the public consultation responses, They show majority support for the new measures, the support for the council's approach to a pool of model conditions, the accreditation of the Best Bar None scheme, and the introduction of the pre-application service I've just described. Overwhelmingly, there's 92% support of Working Group statement of licensing policy, including best practice support, women's safety in the nighttime economy. The views that have been expressed include that the council should amend the policy so that the new any new alcohol licenses must have a condition whereby the licensee must provide free transport home for anyone working after 11 p.m. Free transport home for workers in the hospitality industry working late at night would benefit all workers, but would particularly benefit women to protect them from potential harassment or violence. And no one should have to worry about getting home safely after dark. And that would tie in with the council's aim to be white ribbon accredited. And we've also got a comment saying that, in my opinion, the council does have a responsibility and duty of care to Wokingham residents and their families to work in the hospitality or licensed premises, as well as customers using such premises. And they should, with the policy, it should require all new alcohol licenses and those existing licence holders, where the process requires to be renewed or extended to meet requirements of an enforceable condition where the licensee would provide free transport home for anyone working after 11 p.m. And it shouldn't. It should be extended to all those who finish work close to 11 p.m. and where no public transport is readily available. And then we've also got a comment that says it should include protection for all employees, as young men are also at greater risk from violence than anyone else. And years ago, an example is given as one of their sons was always provided with a taxi home when working late as a barman for a venue in Reading, and it was a huge relief to himself and his parents. There appears to be strong feeling around that. There are several schemes that are mentioned within the policy, an Ask for Angela campaign and Best Bar bystander intervention training. It appears to be sensible to include a Get Me Home Safely campaign. In terms of the ask for this, I think it would be sensible to add this Get Me Home Safely campaign to the policy, to the statement of licensing policy, and then work with our colleagues in legal to draft a suitable condition for the pool of conditions once it's established. If I could bring some potential wording to be added to the new policy to describe this Get Me Home Safely campaign. It's a campaign to make our communities and workplaces safer. And it's a call for change to extend employers' duty of care to embed safer transport policies for our workers and for premises licence holders to adopt a risk assessments that include any individual staff members' journey times and potential hazards once they've left home. The background to that as a measure, it's the development is rooted on a concern for safety of women who work late and unsocial hours, particularly those in low-paid jobs who cannot afford a taxi home and rely on buses and other forms of public transport, which are often scarce or simply unavailable after midnight. And the campaign itself was motivated by an incident that occurred in August 2021, where a woman was sexually assaulted on her way home from work after midnight. She had been asked by her manager to work until 1 a.m. and was promised paid transport home, but because the last bus was midnight, an hour before her shift ended, her manager told her she could finish earlier to catch the last bus home, but for whatever reason, the last bus never arrived and was left to travel home alone late at night, and she was then sexually assaulted. We know many workers across the UK find it difficult to access safe transport following a late shift, and we're painfully aware of the possible consequences for women journeying alone at night, and instances such as the brutal kidnap, rape and murder of Sarah Everard, as well as experiences from women who have been stalked and assaulted outside of their workplace. They're a stark reminder of why we need this campaign, relevant to the statement of licensing policy, and why this issue is relevant to the licensing objective of public safety. So taking that concept of the campaign, there appears to be several responses asking the council to also expand upon the work that they're already doing around being white White Ribbon accredited, but also some of the other schemes that we've included in the statement of licensing policy. So what we would look towards for amending this policy is to add a requirement in that policy now for any new applications and renewal applications seeking licensable hours past 11 p.m. They are expected to put provisions in place for the staff working past 11 p.m. by identifying workable solutions to facilitate safe travel home, such as getting supplemented taxi travel for late shift workers. And we would work with our colleagues in legal to set a bespoke licensing condition, so that we have a standard set within our own policy for any new applications that come in that are late licenses, and we would look to have within our policy the Get Me Home Safely campaign, and for those late licenses to be conditioned with that measure. We also have a response from Remenham Parish Council and Remenham Residents Association. That is detailed as a consultation response. It's the view of the Parish Council and Revenue Residents Association for a number of policy considerations, but they have significantly asked for a cumulative impact assessment. This evening, having taken some legal advice, we see it's a sensible route forward to take this as a report back to the licensing committee for this ask as a consultation response, and perhaps for the next committee, which is in March, for members to hear more about the demands that's being asked around it having a cumulative impact assessment endorsed, and what the practicalities of that includes. From a governance perspective, we have the statement of licensing policy as fit. From a cumulative impact policy, that is effectively a secondary area of the policy. So you can have your statement of licensing policy in place, but then if there's a separate governance process for a cumulative impact, and the steps for cumulative impact are a number of levels. We would have to make a statement that the council was minded to carry out a cumulative impact assessment. A cumulative impact assessment would then have to be carried out, and then the results of that would be brought back, and we'd have to do a separate consultation with those areas that are specifically impacted. So in this case, around the Remenham area, there is a separate governance procedure to that, and after seeking legal advice around how we would want to go forward in taking that assessment, our legal advice is to bring a report back around that as a specific item for the committee to consider its stance on cumulative impact. I think that concludes the report to amend the policy in a certain way and take the cumulative impact as a separate item.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as Safe Journey Home, you've been mentioning about women, but then you mentioned about workers. So does this include, say, young people who are working late as well? Because first off, it was all about the women. I agree, that's where the majority of the risk is, but also impacts on perhaps young workers as well. And you have mentioned workers rather than just specifically women. And the other thing is on a cumulative impact assessment. We looked at this a long time ago in licensing with the Remenham issue, long time ago. And what if we were to implement this? What impact would it have on the events that take place around Remenham, very much in a very short space of time, months, if we introduce this? I mean, a cumulative impact can often be used in towns where there's a number of activities that are similar that create a problem. This is, as far as I can see, seasonal and for a relatively short time. Would it have an impact on the amount of events that could take place?
So just to expand on the legal advice that we've been given, we have a statement of licensing policy which has gone out to the public consultation. We've received responses. We have received a response from the Birmingham Parish Council. As part of their response to the policy, they've requested a cumulative impact assessment. The cumulative impact assessment is effectively a secondary aspect to the policy. It has a separate governance, and it would involve taking views from the residents that are impacted, the parish council, but also what needs to be taken into consideration is those businesses that are also impacted. I think whilst our chair is rightly pointed out that we can't take these questions at present at this meeting, it's in the fairness of a diplomatic response to a policy area that has a set procedure that's in place, and there needs to be views heard within that dynamic from the businesses that would also be affected, as well as the residents. I think it's clearly sensible legal advice to take this as a separate item. You've highlighted and given me questions back, and I would like to answer them, and I'm willing to provide a response to that. But I think if we can take some time and take this as a separate item in exclusivity, then you would benefit from a more detailed report. So I would like to defer to that, if that's possible, Councillor.
Thank you.
Yes, very good. So the first point you made was around safe workers.
The inclusion of all workers rather than just purely women.
Correct. That was pointed out in the consultation responses and yourself. In terms of the focusing on women's safety, but where we get to a point of the final paragraph, it talks about shift workers. So that would be all genders there. So yeah, the license condition would be worded as workers. You're quite right.
Sarah.
I just wanted to query on 3 different aspects of this. I'll go in the order that I've written my questions down. I firstly just wanted a bit of clarity around the pre-app advice service, which I presume is similar to what we do in planning. And I presume this is a new offering. So firstly, on this area, I'd like to understand what you mean by low cost. Is this a case of covering our costs? Have we got a cost in mind? It's all relative. And also, do we actually have capacity in the team for this? Should we get, I don't know what the likely uptake's going to be. I think if I focus on that first, and I'll come to my other 2 questions after, if that's okay.
They're really sensible questions. And I think in terms of low cost, it's low cost by comparison to solicitors' fees. That's why it's low cost. In terms of covering our costs, the costs are set at the officer's time. So we set our fees and charges for the effectively cost recovery. The income that would be generated, the reality is it would be fairly minimal because of the number of licensing applications that we would get. Really, it's a concept to provide benefit to new applicants to try and up their standard when they submit. So in terms of the trade-off, so there's a trade-off where we're effectively providing that officer time. The trade-off is if we didn't provide that officer time, the officer time would still be engaged, but through the consultation process in having to meet with the license holder, potentially having to mediate contentious license applications. And in this model, the council may benefit to a certain extent that it has the ability to map out some of the pitfalls that new applicants might come into contact with.
Thank you. On the Get Me Home campaign, absolutely, it should be all workers, not just young workers either. There are a lot of people that, well, that's what we're calling young here. That's not what, anyone. And that's the great thing about, I think, the violence against women and girls approach is it actually benefits all of society, not just women and girls. But what I'd ask, I know you're going to talk to legal about this to get some wording around that, and I appreciate that you sit in the same team, but making sure that we include obviously our VORG lead with that, as well as the Community Safety Partnership, because I mean, you used a time there of 11 p.m. Is 11 p.m. appropriate for our borough? I mean, I don't know when buses stop running in different parts of the borough. We're talking about after dark. I mean, it's dark at 5 o'clock when I leave the office at the moment. So I think it's going to depend on what might be appropriate in the campaign for maybe more metropolitan areas might not be appropriate for here. We might need an earlier time. I don't know. But I don't think we should just land on 11 p.m. because that's what other areas do. I think we need to look at that, and actually maybe there could be some assistance from the VORG lead and the CSP around actually talking to people and getting some feedback as to what they feel would be appropriate, and actually maybe talk to some of our licence holders about this, about what's feasible. So rather than just legal. So that's, I guess, not a question but a request. And then the other thing I just wanted to pick up on is the cumulative impact assessment aspect with Remenham. I just want to make sure I understand what you were saying earlier. So to do a cumulative impact assessment and what's being requested here, it doesn't need to be stated in the overarching policy that we're discussing tonight. It's an add-on and it doesn't need to be stated. So we can have a discussion about this policy and decide whether we want to go ahead with the approval, whatever. But we can have this as a totally separate item to be discussed separately. If that's the case, which sounds like, because it's quite a big thing to land on us to get into the meat and details of right now. And as you quite rightly say, there are going to be lots of different views we've heard from one side, and it's very hard for us to make an informed decision without hearing further voices on this. I don't know if there is a future session where we can, I don't know, I know this isn't a committee that technically the public speak at, but I just wonder if, like planning, there is a way of doing that so different people, could we amend our rules ever so slightly so we can actually hear people like we do in planning that want to make representation, and equally from the other side as well, so we can make a more informed choice as a committee as to what the right thing to do is, because I do think people want to speak, but now isn't the time for it. I get that.
Please.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to pick up on the women's safety and nighttime economy piece as well, because it was really striking the number of consultation responses that raised this and the safety of workers. And initially, I was disappointed that there wasn't any kind of proposal in terms of what a change in policy might look like, but pleased to hear sort of Kieran's support for some change on this. And I mean, personally, I think we have to include something on safe transport late at night. I mean, it would apply to all workers, as we've said, but there is evidence to show that women feel particularly vulnerable when travelling home, particularly late at night. Many aren't earning high wages, can't afford taxis after the buses stop or whatever. So, they end up walking home in the dark and feeling unsafe. And I think with the recent White Ribbon accreditation, that would really chime with that. It's slightly different, but it certainly would chime with it. And I think the policies we've got drafted at the moment, yes, it's got the inclusion of some of the best practice that we've mentioned, but it's just best practice. It's not requiring licensees to do anything, whereas this would actually require them to actually, to do something. So personally, I'm keen that we don't leave this out of the policy and we don't approve the policy without something in on this. And I mean, I'd be happy to propose the wording that Kieran suggested earlier. If I don't know if Kieran wants to repeat that wording, if people would support that or anyone would second that, but I don't really want to leave. I've been raising this for a while, and I don't particularly want us to approve the policy with just some best practice in. I think we need to make some real change, and that would chime with other things that the council have been doing.
So the conditions would apply to any new licenses or sorry. So new applications and renewal applications seeking licensable hours past 11 p.m. are expected to put provisions in place for their staff working past 11 p.m. by identifying workable solutions to facilitate safe travel home, such as getting supplemented taxi travel for late shift workers. Like I say, it would apply to new applications and renewal applications that come before either a subcommittee. So it would come before the licensing officers making representations for that to be included if it's not already included. So there'd be a role for the licensing officers to check those applications and make comment to direct people to the policy. That's how they would come about. And then if the application itself is not a contentious application, it would be issued under officer delegated authority with that as a condition. If the condition is not agreed, then it's then put before elected members to determine.
Thanks. So I'd like to formally propose that if that wording is included, if anyone would second that.
So could I amend to be able to second, because I've got an issue with the 11 p.m. thing, and I would like some wording to say that subject to discussion with the Community Safety Partnership, our board lead, or however we want to do that, a suitable time would be proposed. It could be that it is 11 p.m, but I'm conscious this might not be suitable for our area. So I'd be happy to second if we could just tweak that.
Yeah, I understand the point, but I'm just concerned that it gives too much leeway. You know, it might be that, oh, well, that's 2 a.m. then, or, you know, and that we then sort of miss the boat on this. Oh, I can see there's a hand up online. I don't know.
Oh, Rachel, our lawyer.
Rachel, would you like to come in?
Yes, through you, Chair. No issue with anything that's being proposed, save for, I don't know if it's just me, but what does supplemented mean? As opposed to, does it mean the same as subsidised?
The supplemented, so I believe it's so that they pay for their taxi fare and they'll get a receipt and then get it back. That would be my understanding. So if you're a nighttime worker from a pub, you get a taxi home, you ask for a receipt from the taxi driver, they give you a receipt, and then the next time you're in work, you claim that back.
My reading was that the employer would contribute, so I don't know if something needs to be done around that wording, because to me it's not clear whether it means the employer will contribute or whether it can be claimed back by way of expenses. And obviously it is only for the applicant to propose, but I just wonder if it could be a bit clearer.
Contribute, such as having taxi travel such as having a contribution towards taxi travel for late shift workers. I think the ambition would be to have the full cost of that taxi travel covered.
Yeah.
I think we need to be clear about that.
Reimbursed is quite reimbursed. Rachel, would be
reimbursed or subsidised if we don't expect the licensee to pay the full amount.
We would expect the licensee to pay the full amount. So I think reimbursed is the view.
Yeah. Perfect. I just think that's clearer than supplemented. It's open to interpretation unless that's my misunderstanding of it. But if I'm misunderstanding it, anyone else could as well.
Well, just to say I agree with that change. But also, yeah, in terms of the hours, I mean, I think the Get Me Home Safely campaign is a kind of national campaign, and they use 11 o'clock, which is where that's come from. Personally, I'm happy with the 11 o'clock. I mean, if you've got a specific amendment that you would propose. But I think it's important we include this now, because presumably, we need to get this. That's another thing we need to make a decision on and get it approved, right? So
I believe we have some pubs open in the Wokingham town centre until 3 in the morning.
But sorry to come back, but I'm not sure if that's relevant really. I mean, whether it's 11, how late they're open. It's after 11, so it captures them and it captures more regular opening hours, doesn't it?
I think the point is, I mean, I wouldn't want to walk home after 10 o'clock, but I don't know, I don't know. I mean, do we go with 11? Do we go with 10 earlier? All I was thinking was, I mean, who decides who and how and when we feel safe, I guess, and should that be down to us? I don't know. I just think 11's quite late given the lack of public transport we have in this area. So for an area that has buses that go that late, that's my only thinking. So, I mean, I would either maybe want to bring that slightly forward, or I guess the proposed wording would be that is no later than 11 o'clock, but could be explored to look at whether early is more appropriate or something. I agree, I want something in this, definitely. It's just making sure that we get the right thing in this. And
I'm just wondering how the employee will know about that check and balances, that employers are investing their money, and how a new employer is supposed to know that after 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning.
I think it's a really sensible point, and I think the answer is probably going to be on that individual licensee's application, because it'll be relevant to where they're located in the bus time. So we need the license holders, when they come in to apply, to carry out a risk assessment. So they're going to need to adopt a risk assessment, and that risk assessment to include an individual staff member's journey times and potential hazards once they've left the workplace. So if we're requiring on application for them to conduct a risk assessment, as part of that risk assessment, we're looking at individual staff members' journey times, and then a licensing officer can draw inference on whether or not the 11 o'clock is satisfactory and given an opinion, because opinion can be given to a committee. And then either the applicant can agree that, or it can be taken to a committee to have that as a conversation. So I think the answer there is to add, we've obviously got for the 11 p.m. and I think it's sensible to keep 11 p.m. in place, but also to include as part of that condition where we're taking things is for the premises license holder to include a risk assessment that include for the premises license holders that are applying to adopt a risk assessment. They include an individual staff member's journey times and potential hazards once they've left the workplace. And if we get that as a risk assessment, what we're expecting back from the risk assessment is those journey times home from different, if it's the buses that they're getting and so on.
Michael.
I wasn't really going to mention, I was going to mention about Remenham, so whether I should come back later. But just adding to this point, it's probably slightly complicated, and I think Sarah was referring to it a little bit earlier on, about some areas of the borough are better, have better bus services, like parts of Early, it's the Route 21 is all night, all day. So I know not all areas are like that. So I think you've probably got to look at it, a worst case scenario, look at it on the worst area and kind of base it on that. But I don't disagree with what's been said. But if I can come back later on Remenham when we finish this.
Rachel, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of quick things. So looking at the rest of the policy, 11 p.m. is a time that we use for other areas. So it's consistent with that in terms of what we mean by late night. In terms of your point, Michael, I think the risk assessment basically covers that, because it's saying, well, let's look at the area, let's look at where our workers are going, you know. So I think that would pick that point up, and the way it's worded, it does give some sort of leeway. It doesn't mean this is absolutely set in stone. It puts the onus on the applicant to say, look, this is how we're addressing this, and this is what we've considered. So
Morag.
Oh, thank you. It was just that I think the idea of a risk assessment is a really good one, because then that could be tailored to local conditions, where if you know the bus service tends to be unreliable and the last bus might not arrive, for example, then that could be covered within that. So I think that's excellent. Thank you.
I think that can be written into the licensing policy so that when the license is applied for, the officers deal with that issue and make it appropriate to the locality of wherever people are working. Rachel?
So can I formally propose that again then? And do I now have a seconder?
I'll second.
So do we need to vote on that now?
Do we need to vote on bringing the statement of licensing policy in now and then bring a cumulative impact report separately? Is that would that be a vote as well? Yeah.
I thought the chairman has agreed to bring it separately.
Sorry, Michael, we wanted to say something?
Yeah, well, on the Remnant aspect of it, I mean, I'm grateful for what Kieran said. It is very involved. It's not a short period. This is a period of 3 or 4 months of the year with 3 major festivals. And I can speak because I actually work in Henley, so I'm on the other side of the river. So I do see the impact on Henley Town, and it does change completely. And obviously this is stretching onto the Wokingham side as well. And people kind of view it as Henley anyhow. If you live in Remnant, you view it as Henley. So you know, I think the best way forward is to bring this back to the next meeting and look at it in detail, because the impact on, well, they say on page 287, it's a village of 500 residents, and it can go up to a total, well, according to their figures, Henley Royal Regatta of 300,000. So they are absolutely swamped by people. And I can understand their concerns about trying to protect what they've got. So I think we should take it into consideration and consider it properly.
Pete.
Just further following on from the Remnant one, there's the first one is the impact assessment. Then we've got 4 further questions. So when will those be dealt with?
So the other items are framework, hours, activities. The Parish Council and Residents Association take the view that a local area requires a special policy in respect to framework hours and activities in the parish area. Environmental at 3, environmental impacts policy. The council, the Residents Council and Residents Association takes the view the council needs to consider a wider environmental impacts of these large scale events on a rural area, and then attends policy. The Parish Council Residents Association as view tends to use this add to the existing offerings. I think the most significant area we can provide I think officers will be able to provide a response to the consultation questions that have been proposed. So we'll be able to provide a response to those 4 items, but it would need a separate report around the cumulative impact because of the ask.
Bill?
When is the next licensing and bills committee meeting? March. Does that give us enough time to implement these changes after that? Before we start the events in Remnant?
No. The cumulative impact assessment, you would have to assess the impact, which would, if the committee becomes minded to do that, then you would take an assessment of the impact perhaps for that forthcoming event or event period, and then we would come back for the findings of that impact assessment. There'd then be a consultation between residents and businesses, and then you would have a paper around those consultation responses. So there is a set out democratic process for cumulative impact policies and assessment, and you wouldn't be able to have a policy put in place on cumulative impact this year, but it may be the case that you initiate steps towards it.
Pete.
So we're talking about having different witnesses coming to speak. How would that occur? I'm just wondering about how the process would work out.
We would have a session on a decision whether or not you would want the committee would like to initiate a cumulative impact assessment. Later on, there is consultation responses. So it's a policy. So it's a special licensing policy on cumulative impact. So there'll be the assessment of need for cumulative impact if we were to go ahead with it, that assessment being carried out, and then a consultation exercise of the residents, parish council, and premises within that area, because it's over a zone. It would be over a zone. So there'd be the point where you would expect discourse would be at the consultation point with most policies. So there'll be a consultation, and then at the consultation, members of the public could ask questions on that, and as businesses or as parish councils. So it'd be part of the consultation exercise, which would come quite late in the day, actually.
Rachel, did you want to add anything to that? Oh, yeah, sorry. Rachel, our solicitor.
Sorry, Chair, I thought you were talking to Rachel, our member.
Yeah.
Not really. I think Kieran is entirely right. There's a lot to consider in relation to the question of a community impact assessment, and there are a number of different factors, and I don't believe it's something that the committee should be looking to implement tonight. But officers need to go back and have a proper look at the very full submission that's been put forward. So nothing really. In my view, that's entirely the correct and appropriate way to go with it.
Thank you. Mike?
It does strike me this is an incredibly complicated area for which we are very unprepared this evening to be able to debate it successfully. My understanding from a very brief reading of Home Office guidance is that cumulative impact assessments are normally concerned with typically town centres where there are a large number of premises providing the same sort of facilities, and one more, two more, or whatever is beginning to become an cumulative impact. I think I'm right in saying that this is a single licence per event, so it's not multiple licensed premises, which is a bit of a grey area. But I could see, if we want to go down this route, lots and lots of legal arguments, both from those opposed and those in favour of things going ahead, costing a lot of money, because there's a lot of money at play here. The regatta has operated successfully since 18, whatever it was, in the same place as I understand it. Maybe it's a bit bigger these years than it was, but I think we do need a great deal more information to be able to form any sort of sensible opinion.
I think you're right, Mike. It is a huge piece of work, but it's very clear that Remenham is impacted by the events that happen local to it in the summer. And so we do need to have a look at it. And the only way to do it properly is to do that assessment. Sarah?
Do we need then a formal proposal then to say that we will defer a decision on this until the next meeting where we have a full report? And can we just do that and then move on? Yeah.
What?
Sorry, are we deferring the whole policy?
No, that's that piece of it.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. No, we don't want to defer the whole policy.
So,
Rachel, did you want to add
It
something?
was just a really quick thing about the policy. When would it actually come into force? Now, what happens next with it?
Thank you. That's a good question. We took legal advice on that. For this policy, it would be at the approved by committee potentially this evening or in March, and it would then be approved under the current constitution by the director. So it doesn't go to full council or exec member. It would be through this committee. Sorry, I do apologise. This goes to full council. I do apologise. The Hackney one is what we've decided on. Okay, and that's by the director. This is a full council. There's a statement of licensing policy. I do apologise. I think the Residents Association would like to have a response in terms of the areas that they've given, and we would be able to give an officer's response to several of the areas that they've highlighted, and then without any amendments to the existing policy, but then a separate item for the cumulative impact assessment.
Just looking around, Bill, you look puzzled. Was that okay?
Just question. With something like the Henley Regatta, it's not just one licence, it's every event operator that's there that applies individually for the licence, is it?
Yeah, so the majority are licensed under a premises licence, which is indefinite. So year on year, they have that licence. Several are licensed under a temporary event notice, and they make use of TENS. So every year we'll get a temporary event notice submitted, and they'll be licensed over or under that authorization. So there's existing premises license for, I think there's 2 premises license for Henley Regatta, and then there's several other licensed premises that pop up, but they have that license already, so they're not repeating the exercise of applying every time. As part of that, in terms of the response, we'll give that detail.
Okay, let's go back to this Safe Journey Home. If they've got a licence that goes year on year and they're not applying for a new licence, when is the Safe Journey Home policy enforced if they're not actually putting a new risk assessment and everything else in?
Yeah. We can. The wording on the Get Me Home Safely campaign will affect new licenses or licenses that are amended, like by way of a variation. It won't have an impact on existing licensed premises. So where there are pubs and clubs in the town centre, we are not able to change conditions on those licenses unless we carry out a review of each individual premises. So the policy can only take into effect licenses that are issued going forward. So where they come in under a review itself, or they come because of a variation, or it's a new application. Ma'am, it may be Chair, it may be sensible to and worthy for a response to be given to Remenham Parish Council and Remenham Farms Residents Association, a full response in terms of we're going to come back for a report anyway in March. It may be sensible to provide a response to the consultation for them in March, so they've got a full and complete response, and then settle the policy in as full in March. That might be a sensible way forward. So not taking a decision on the statement of licensing policy. It also gives us the ability to make sure that draft wording on the Get Me Home Safely, I think we're quite happy with it, but it gives the ability for the committee to endorse that at that point. So if we could have the March committee for the response to consultation responses and the detail that it requires on cumulative impact, that might be the best way forward if we could defer that decision.
Sarah, you wanted to comment?
It's just a very quick question. you said about the process for approving the statement of licensing policies to go to full council. Was it already on the forward plan for a particular council meeting? Was that March maybe, or?
It would flow naturally if we do defer it. Yeah, it would go to the following full council meeting. I don't think it's put on as an item for full council yet.
The only reason why I'm asking is because I feel that there's some urgency still around the Get Me Home campaign, and the longer we do this, then the longer we're not bringing in something like that. Yeah. And my other fear is that if we defer making a decision tonight and push it to our March licensing meeting, it will then push into the next municipal year for a full council meeting with there may be a load of councillors that have had very little involvement in this, and that's my concern. I would rather see this policy go through this municipal year and get it onto the March full council plan. That's my view, and I think we can deal with all the concerns raised by Remenham in a separate manner, which doesn't impact on this, which allows us to give it the time it needs. But I personally wouldn't like to defer our decision tonight and include in our recommendation that this does go on to the March full council meeting, which would be the next one it could be heard at. But I do think it has to be this municipal year.
Okay.
I agree with Sarah there. I think it has to go to the March meeting.
Can I summarise? We have Remenham Residents Association in attendance, and they've come some way, and I think they're worthy of having a response on those remaining 4 items this evening. So if I provide a response to that now, and then we can settle the statement of licensing policy, and obviously bring the cumulative impact. Mm-hmm. So there's a request for a dedicated Remenham Parish Safety Advisory Group, which is the acronym is SAG. And the Parish Council and Residents Association considers that the terms and participation of a SAG should be set out in the policy to provide greater transparency, participation to the local community and its representatives. We have had this raised before, and it's come through a successful application to review a licensed premises at Rewind Festival. The SAG as a concept is a safety advisory group, and one of the big barriers to the Residents Association attending those SAG meetings is around how the SAG is an advisory group of selected members who head up their own disciplines, whether that's in environmental health, licensing, police, fire, and so on. And we do also have the introduction of counter-terrorism measures that are coming forward. We also need to maintain the buy-in of operators to attend those groups. So we are at a position where the residents associations don't have a space on those groups considered from a security purposes perspective, and also the buy-in for the actual licensees that are attended, some of which have raised their own objections to having residents on a panel. We've got to a point where for some licensees we run separate residents meetings, and we've got to a point where we are minded to bring in the views of residents through the parish council, so through the clerk of the parish council. For temporary event notices, the Parish Council and Residents Association is a view that tends to use to add to the existing offerings used as a way of circumnavigating licensing requirements. And the Parish Council and Residents Association take the view that a policy statement setting out the expectations of the licensing authority in respect of applicants, the environmental health team of police would be a useful addition to the policy. So the temporary event notices, they're statutory, they're set as a statutory measure. There's not a concept of setting out policy requirements. However, from a licensing manager's or licensing officer's perspective, it is likely that we are going to be working with the they're called premises users under temporary event notices. It's likely that we're going to be working with the premises users this year and encouraging them to submitting full premises license applications. That's individualistic. There have been inspections on different licensed premises. There's been involved work with where we want to take them, and there are views of the licensing authority officers and ASB officers that carried out different inspections where they would want to see a premises license application. The reason we want to see premises license application is because under TENS we can't add conditions where there's not an existing licensed premises, and we feel that it may be necessary for different conditions to be added where we found some issues that need identifying. I think that's where the feeling has come in, because the residents have felt as though they don't have the ability to object. They don't have the ability to object to TENS. Only the police and only the environmental health officers can actually object to TENS. But it is the view of the licensing authority to work with some of those license holders in terms of applying for new licenses. So that's 4. Environmental impacts policy. The Parish Council and Residents Association take the view that the council needs to consider the wider environmental impacts of these large-scale events on a rural area. Environmental impacts policies, that again is not necessarily going to be a part of the statement of licensing policy, but would be more individualistic to each of those licensed premises. And it's a sensible position, and we've seen from a recent review of a licensed premises that they are currently looking at their environmental impacts. So I think there is potential some work there with individualistic licensees, but that could only come into play if there's a review of an existing licensed premises, or if there's new licensed premises at the site, rather than through the statement of licensing policy. And then we've also got a request for framework hours and activities, and the Parish Council and Residents Association takes the view that the local area requires a special policy in respect of framework hours and activities within the parish and local area. From an officer's perspective to the committee to consider, I would put forward that we do not receive a high number of new licence applications in the Remenham area that would demand a specific policy for that area when it comes to framework hours and activities. And should there be an application, there is an existing ability as part of that 28-day consultation to put in a representation. So if there is issues around licensed hours and there is a need for the hours to be discussed as a measure, then as we see quite commonly for any new premises license application, which is quite routine as a measure, that new applicants will put in an application for a greater hours than they actually require, and they almost do that as a technique and as a strategy, and then it requires licensing officers, or quite often members of the public, to highlight, no, we don't like this, we don't want a premises that's so late, and they have the ability to make representation. So we wouldn't necessarily look to put in framework hours or activities. It would be preferred in the spirit of the Licensing Act to allow the ability for applications to be made in that way, and it be for them to be considered by way of representation. And then at 1 on cumulative impact, there is an ask for it. It's a sensible ask. There are lots of factors. There are lots of areas that need to be brought to the table, and I think when we come back to a report on this, we're probably going to see a relatively detailed report around the Remenham area, around Rewind Festival, around how that impacts. So we're obviously clearly minded to bring that back to a separate area. If you're satisfied with that, councillors.
I'm looking round and I can't see any dissatisfaction. Are we happy to move to the vote? Yes. No.
I think it's to Chair. It's to adopt the
two issues.
Adopt the statement of licensing policy, which goes to full council, and then bring back a paper for the next committee around cumulative impact.
Yeah.
Do you want to do one first?
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Could I just add to that first recommendation that we adopt the statement of licensing policy, and this committee requests that this is goes to March full council meeting 2024, and we explicitly state that.
And also that we adopt it as amended.
Yes.
So now we all know what we're voting on. Right, the first issue, the council going to full policy issue. Can I see a show of hands for that, please? And the policy goes to March full council. Yeah. Thank you. That's unanimous. And the second issue is, I'll call it the Remenham issue, because it means we work together with Remenham on doing a cumulative impact assessment. We've already done hours of work on Remenham in the past when it first came in. A show of hands on that, please. Sorry? Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, with regards to the Revenant issue on the next committee meeting, I know we've got members of the public here. Are we going to be allowing them to speak, to present a case or discuss whatever has been presented during that meeting?
I think when we start to look at the cumulative impact assessment, there'll be lots of meetings that we have together with Remenham. At least that's what we did before. I don't know if Rachel wants to come in and comment on that. When the festivals first came in, we did an impact assessment.
Do you mean Rachel member or Rachel I?
Oh, I mean you, Rachel, to give us some legal advice.
Yes, in general, so speaking at this committee hearing and asking questions are governed by slightly different parts of the Constitution, which I think could have caused a bit of confusion this evening. So questions do indeed need to be submitted in advance, and if they are urgent and arising directly from what's been published, they can be accepted late, but not on the evening. In terms of speaking at the actual committee, as opposed to asking questions, that is dealt with in accordance with paragraph 8.4.6. After each main presentation, members of the public and other organisations may be allowed to speak through the chair. Any statements from speakers must be relevant to the item or presentation just received, and speaking time will be limited to 5 minutes per item at the discretion of the chair. So, and then I'm just going on to have a look, see if there's anything to add to that. No, so it would be, Chair, with your discretion, effectively, and as appropriate, but different to the question requirement where those are received in writing. So it would be open to hear submissions,
okay,
effectively, if appropriate.
And I suspect it will be a separate meeting to deal with Remenham on its own. And so there will be a chance for us to exchange comments. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to set the expectation because I'm conscious that people have taken the effort to come to this but not been able to speak. So I want to guarantee that they're given time to speak during a subject which is relevant to them, so we can hear their views as well.
I think we'll need to work with Remenham on it before we come to the meeting so that we can work together and know what we expect from it. And I'm happy to do that.